Welcome to the Healthcare Technology Report, a leading information source on healthcare technology companies and solutions. In this episode, we speak with Richard Vincent, co-founder and CEO of Fundamental XR, a company using immersive technologies such as VR, AR, MR, and haptics to transform how surgical teams and medical professionals train. Fundamental XR provides realistic, measurable training environments that improve skill retention and accelerate learning, with adoption across more than 200 healthcare institutions in over 50 countries. Richard has more than 25 years of experience building international businesses and co-founded Fundamental XR to address the long-standing challenge of creating safe, realistic spaces for clinical skill development. Under his leadership, the company is advancing towards its vision of building a global, haptically enabled flight simulator for surgeons. Fundamental XR's platform combines high-fidelity anatomy, custom imaging, and enterprise-grade security to deliver scalable training for clinical teams worldwide. I'm your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you like the episode, click to follow. Richard, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's a delight to be with you.
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me over.
So you operate in a really interesting space, and that is training physicians or surgical professionals via virtual reality. And you've been around for some time, so maybe curious how you decided to embark in this particular area of, virtual medicine, so to speak.
Yeah, no, happy to tell a little bit of background on it. So my background is I've always been in the technology world. I spent the first 15 years of my career in the emerging mobile technology world. And then about 10 years ago, took a good hard look at the virtual reality world as it was starting to emerge at that point. For those who can remember that far back in that industry, there were no virtual reality headsets at that point. We were still at the kind of the DK1 Oculus product. But I could see with my business partner, I could see the potential that immersive technology could bring to industry and at a more fundamental level to kind of the human computing interface. I could see the real potential there. And so as a technologist, decided that's an area that I really want to explore. The next question was where to focus that attention. And after a little bit of testing a few different vertical markets, concluded that the problem space in the medical arena was firstly the most compelling, secondly, probably the most valuable in the next 10 years, and could have the biggest impact from a number of different areas. And so really focused into that area and then started to build out Fundamental VR as it was, now Fundamental XR, starting in the virtual reality space and then moving into the other immersive technologies as they become commercially viable.
Mm-hmm. You point to how the medical space is the most compelling and valuable. It's also the most difficult.
Yeah.
And so did that put you off, meaning like, oh, maybe we shouldn't head into this space? But you did go in and curious how you found the challenges or how you were able to kind of navigate through the difficulties of working in VR and medicine.
It's certainly a very complex and fairly conservative, slow-moving space, which is kind of in itself interesting because there's so many innovations that happen in medicine, but actually for all the right reasons, the regulatory environment that we operate within, it's a very methodical process of adoption. And certainly we've seen that within our sphere. But to answer your question, I mean, I took counsel from many individuals who had extensive experience in the medical field. When I started Fundamental XR, it was my first journey into the medical sphere, and many of them counseled me to avoid it. But for every one that said I should avoid it, another one was saying, if you can have the impact you think you might, the net gain there is worth it. And so, with eyes open, really drove into that space. And what I was really delighted and somewhat surprised about from a very early stage was how many very experienced surgeons and educational leads and nursing leads and industry leads lent in those early years because, again, they were captured by the potential. I think also, like many, were ready for a change. We're looking for a different way, a different modality. The mechanism of learning complex procedures really hasn't changed very much in, 150 years or so. And during that time, what those procedures are, and the techniques have increased in complexity so much. So to find a modality to take that on was just too appealing to pass up. I guess the biggest surprise I had when I first moved into this sector was, I'd first imagined that there would be defined standard processes and human factors and methodologies for conducting different types of procedures. And what I found was that there were, of course, in the industry side, instruction for use, but there was a lot of very, very vocal opinions on what was right and wrong. And so trying to create products that virtualize and best practice in the early stages was incredibly complicated and difficult to land. But we stuck with it. And here we are 10 years later, and it's moved from something 10 years ago when I talked to many industry players on it, they would say, well, what is virtual reality, let alone how would we use it? It's gone from that to today, really across industry and across the healthcare institutions being one of the modalities that is sought and often expected to be in the learning library that's available to individuals.
Can you tell us about prevalence in the market today? Like how many institutions or hospitals are using Fundamental XR?
So we go to market primarily through industry. The way that the medical industry works, a lot of the training and education is funded through industry. So we found the most effective way is through industry and then into the end users. So we really focus on that part of our entry point of the market. So working with the big players in the market that make medical devices, pharmaceutical, etc. They then carry that on into the healthcare institutions as part of their go-to-market medical education training programs. I guess we're trying to stand on the shoulders of the giants that are there rather than find another channel through. But to answer your question, today we've had over 75,000 procedures undertaken through our platform across over 20 different surgical disciplines, across over 35 countries. It's got good traction throughout most of the key sectors that we work in.
I see. And I noticed that ophthalmology is one of the areas you focus on. And so I'm curious, at what stage does the physician start using your platform? Is it during their residency? Is it later on and as they get further into specialization within ophthalmology? How do they begin interacting with your platform?
So generally, because of our route through the market, being with those medical device and pharma companies, we tend to be beyond residency when people start to find access to the fundamental platform. There are some exceptions to that. So with one of our partners, Orbis International, there we have a cataracts haptic training system that's designed exactly for residents to do that early learning stage. But normally our procedures are later stage where people are specializing. And of course, learning never stops, right? Again, I talked about that rate of innovation that's happening in the market. Even if you've been in the ophthalmology space for 20 years, there are new procedures and techniques that are coming through. And so you need to return to that learning cycle on a month by month, year by year basis. And so we plug into all stages really. But I guess in general terms, we'll be working post residency with doctors who've specialized and are attending or beyond even that stage. A good example would be with gene therapy in ophthalmology. With one of our pharmaceutical customers, they have a groundbreaking gene therapy that cures blindness. It's for the very, very experienced ophthalmologic surgeons. There are probably only 150 across the world who can do this procedure today. And just about every one of them will have been through our platform to acquire those skills, because quite simply, it's almost impossible to acquire them anywhere else in terms of hands-on experience. So yes, it's across the range, but tends to be at the later stage of career.
And what would surgeons be using otherwise if they didn't have access to your platform? I presume that you do have competitors, but maybe not exact competitors.
We do. We have competitors in lots of different guises, as you allude to. So in traditional training terms, you might be using didactic training, cadaveric training, wet lab training. Now, we don't seek to replace that, but we can certainly make that far more valuable, augment it, and make it a much more useful investment alongside that activity. Our platform sits very nicely in it before that stage of engagement. In other areas, there are what I call capital equipment simulators. That market's been in existence for many years, worth about $2 billion worldwide. These are purpose-built, single-use fantastic simulators that do all sorts of things. But the challenge with them is their unit costs tend to be six figures. They need to exist in a sim center. They need a technician to run them. And they do one thing. They do it well, but they do one thing. Whereas our platform travels in a carry-on suitcase that you can put on a plane. It can be training orthopedics in this moment, and in the next moment with gross movements and haptic interaction, and then the next moment it can be doing a very, very sophisticated eye procedure, and then on to cardiovascular. One single piece of hardware investment, much, much lower cost, much more scalable. And that was my driver when we started, was really thinking about how could we get to an impact through high levels of scale. And so to do that, you have to make the unit cost at scale very small. And we're getting close to that now with the way the technology is coming through.
What's the best way to convey the accuracy of your platform solution, hardware, software, in terms of like this scenario, you can travel with everything in a suitcase, and then perhaps you have a headset, and then you have some device you're operating on. How accurate is the simulation?
I guess the answer to that depends on how you define accuracy and what the important learning outcomes are. So if we look at it in absolute terms, our system that can be anything from a pair of glasses with a mixed reality experience where you and I are sitting in the same room and it's presented in front of us, but we're very much in that room. It can be that experience through to a full haptic system in virtual reality where you are completely immersed. And as you said, you're holding devices that are giving you physical feedback. If we take the latter of those two, the physicality of that has precision down to a sub-millimeter level. We're able to monitor, measure every movement, every telemetry within that system, and then using AI systems, report, predict, anticipate, guide in real time within that system. So the accuracy and measurement is absolute, and it's far beyond what you would achieve in a more traditional training environment where it tends to be observation and opinion. When it comes to accuracy of the curriculum or the training material, well, that's the same curriculum and training material that exists in any modality. It just happens to be in our mixed reality or our virtual reality system. So that's all about the educational content. We have a great educational team. We work with all of our customers and partners on their educational team. And together, we think we build a really accurate, meaningful curriculum that will deliver the outcome that we're trying to achieve. Because it doesn't necessarily have to be a system that does everything that happens in the real world. What it has to do is do something beyond what you could do with your traditional route. So what I mean by that is, if it's a 3-hour procedure, we could virtualize the whole thing. But actually, it might be that there are 2 or 3 moments in that procedure which are, if you like, mission critical. So let's really focus the technology on those things. Yes, we could simulate hammering a bone, but actually you can pick up a hammer in the real world very simply. But when it comes to making a very small incision into a vascular space, that's much harder to achieve. So we'd focus in the latter rather than the former.
Mm-hmm. Med tech companies can sometimes require a lot of capital to get off the ground and start scaling. Have you brought in outside capital?
We have, yes. Yeah. We've done a few rounds of investment. We did our Series B a couple of years ago, 2022, so nearly 3 years ago. And that's helped us a lot. Yes, you're right. We've needed to build a platform infrastructure to achieve that. And our backers have been fantastic in their vision and their patience as well, because they all understand that the medtech industry moves fast and slow at the same time.
And what do you foresee for the company? What's the vision for fundamental XR in the near term and perhaps in the long term?
So the exciting thing is the pace of change over the last 10 years has been pretty dramatic. I think it's never been as fast as it is right now. The developments in the mixed reality world, where we're having contextual devices that could be worn in the future all day long in a glasses format. I think that's a very exciting area, and that's an area that we're really leaning into at the moment. We can see that as a big, new and important space for immersive technology or spatial technology. So in the short term, I think we really are focusing on the modality of moving to scale in mixed reality and through other modalities, even websites, mobilizing into web interfaces to try and really increase the scale compounding effect on our virtual experiences. In terms of our long-term aspirations, well, I believed it 10 years ago, and I still believe it today, and I'll believe it in 10 years' time. I do believe that there's a point in the future where medicine will look back at the way that most teaching happens and has happened, particularly in the surgical field, and will say, well, it happened like that for a reason at that point, but frankly, that's not acceptable. We shouldn't be learning on live patients. We should be learning in a controlled environment. So I have this phrase I call pre-human competence, which is quite simply, don't rehearse on me. Let's give you a digital version of me where you can rehearse there, first of all, run the scenarios, and then move into the operating room with that full competency. And that's really our long-term vision, and trying to get that across all the appropriate modalities of surgical and medical training. There's a lot of work to do there, where if it's a 20-step process, we're probably one step into it so far.
Mm-hmm. Two final questions as we kind of end the conversation. One is, can you tell us about a person who has had a profound influence on you?
Yeah, I've been really lucky through my career in all the stages of it to have some fantastic people around me. I think probably one of the most influential people in my life is actually my co-founder and long-term friend, Chris Scattergood. He and I have been together 30 years through two different businesses. And what I've gained from my friendship first and association with Chris through business second is somebody who is kind of the yin to my yang and has always brought a positivity to any challenging situation. And you'll know, startups are never straight lines. They go all over the place. And having somebody who's able to always pick up, look for the positive, find the quicker solution and move it forward has really helped me and has had probably the biggest influence on my life, let alone my career.
Last question. Can you tell us about a charity, cause, or other endeavor that you're passionate about?
Yeah, that's an easy one. Orbis. It's actually one of our customers because we're really passionate about it. It's a charity that focuses on removing cataract blindness from developing nations. Cataracts are the single biggest driver of economic failure in a lot of developing nations. It affects so many people and has such a profound impact on their lives. Teaching people to do operations that allow individuals to see, you just see the impact in all the places where it goes. So super passionate about that. Wish I could spend more time supporting them than we do already, but yeah, it's a big one for me.
Well, Richard, I want to thank you again for taking the time. It's been a wonderful conversation.
PJ, really good to see you. Thanks for the time.